The following is a presentation of Comworld Media. The future of talk.
Hi, this is Phil Valentine. We hear it all the time. It's all the rage. Socialism is better than capitalism. Oh, socialism is compassionate. Capitalism is evil. Is socialism better than capitalism? In a moment, I'm calling Bovine Scatology on that.
I'm calling Bovine Scatology with Phil Valentine.
In order to discern whether socialism is better than capitalism, we first have to figure out what socialism is. Or better yet, what socialism isn't. Here's what Bernie Sanders says socialism is.
When you go to your public library and you call your fire department or the police department, what do you think you're calling? These are socialist institutions.
And Bernie's followers are out there on the internet regurgitating this stuff.
Imagine a world where if your house catches on fire and you call 911, fire department comes out, they put out the fire, everything's fine, your house isn't damaged too much, your stuff's not burned or anything, you didn't lose anything. Now imagine they send you a bill the next month for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And because this isn't just like a tax-funded fire department, this is a for-profit business that put out your fire. And they can charge you whatever they want because what are you going to do? Put out your own fire? Like, you have to use them. And so there's like shareholders and the CEO, they're all getting rich off of people's houses catching on fire.
Okay, so we've identified the first problem. They don't understand what capitalism is. This guy thinks that some fire department that's capitalist will charge whatever they want to put the fire out at your house. That's not the way capitalism works. Capitalism works on competition. So if there's one fire department that'll do it for this price, there's another fire department that will do it for less until they finally find what the market value of putting a fire out is. And of course, everybody has insurance, and they'll have to go through insurance companies in order to get reimbursed. So this is a straw man argument. There are certain things that we as a society decide that we should provide through government services. We're talking about roads, we're talking about police, we're talking about fire, we're talking about national defense, we're talking about coining money. I like to put it this way. The government is there to do only what the private sector won't, can't, or shouldn't do. Can the private sector provide fire services? Yeah, possibly. Will they do it? Probably not. There's not going to be a whole lot of money in it when you find out how much you're getting reimbursed from the insurance companies, not to mention the people who won't pay you because they don't have insurance and they can't afford to pay you. Should they do it? Probably not. So the government does fire services. Same thing for police. Same thing for the military. This is not socialism. This is called government. So if police, fire, and military are not socialism, what is socialism? Socialism basically is when everybody owns everything collectively together. It's essentially the government running everything, industry, the economy, everything. Whatever you make through your hard work, you have to redistribute to everybody else because they don't have as much as you do. It's not fair. We hear that all the time from the socialists. Competition is what makes everybody better, but they don't like competition. And this disdain for competition is a theme that runs throughout socialism around the globe. It's a common denominator. Matter of fact, I was reading from a website. It's called liberationschool.org, The 6 Ways Socialism is Superior to Capitalism. And the first one is eliminating competition as the basis for survival. Here's what they say. Capitalism is premised first and foremost on competition between individuals. Yeah. And they give us an example, Walmart opening up in Washington, D.C., and they have 24,000 people show up for 800 jobs. They think that's a bad thing because 23,200 didn't get the job. This is the way they look at capitalism. But the truth is, if Walmart weren't competing with other companies, there wouldn't have been those 800 new jobs. Competition stinks to these folks. They hate it. But it's competition that makes every company and every person better. I mean, everybody knows this innately. When we look at sports, one team competing against another team makes both teams better. Everybody really understands this. So do the socialists. So they have to resort to their standby scare tactics.
The challenge we confront today as a nation and as a world is in many ways not different from the one we faced a little less than a century ago during and after the Great Depression of the 1930s.
You know where old Bernie's going with this one, don't you? This is one of the more popular tropes from the socialists. The capitalists are actually Nazis, and they want to hold down minorities, and they're just evil people.
Then as now, deeply rooted and seemingly intractable economic and social disparities led to the rise of right-wing nationalist forces all over the world.
Folks, the Nazis were socialists. This is something that has been debunked over and over again. Nazis stood for National Socialist German Workers' Party. The Nazis were the ones who were playing to the class envy and class warfare to try to rally the people around their cause, and they made the Jews, the rich capitalist Jews, the scapegoats.
In Europe, the anger and despair was ultimately harnessed by authoritarian demagogues who fused corporatism, nationalism, racism, and xenophobia into a political movement that amassed totalitarian power, destroyed democracy, and ultimately murdered millions of people, including members of my own family.
So Bernie and the rest of these socialists try to make capitalists into evil Nazis when the Nazis were them. But Phil, I thought the communists were far on the left and the Nazis were far on the right. No, they're two wings of the same bird. This is what Sigmund Freud referred to as the narcissism of small differences. It means that communities, or in this case ideologies, that are in close proximity tend to feud a lot. So you find the communist and the fascist are always at each other's throats. Why is that? Because they're fighting over one thing. They're fighting over control of you. And their number one weapon is class warfare.
It is not just that the very rich are getting much richer. It is that tens of millions of working class people in the wealthiest country on earth are suffering under incredible economic hardship, desperately trying to survive.
Desperately trying to survive. Well, according to the Census Bureau, it shows that the middle class has now reached an all-time high as far as income is concerned. But Bernie and others love to tell us about the shrinking middle class. Well, the shrinking middle class means that the middle class is getting richer. Look, the poverty rate hovers somewhere between 12% and 15%, depending on whether we're in a recession or not. These are the latest stats. As of this recording, 11.8%. It's the lowest poverty rate we've had in some time. So if the middle class is not getting poorer, they must be getting richer.
After decades of policies that have encouraged and subsidized unbridled corporate greed, we now have an economy that is fundamentally broken and grotesquely unfair.
See, the socialists love to talk about the income distribution like it's distributed. Income is not distributed, it's earned. But if you say it's distributed, then you can redistribute it. But as we've already demonstrated, the poverty rate is going down. They tell us the middle class is shrinking. Logic would dictate if it's shrinking, it's going up. So even though the very rich are getting richer, everybody else is doing well too. The socialists want you to believe it's a zero-sum game, but it's not. Everybody can get better off all at the same time.
Millions of middle-class and working-class people struggle to keep their heads above water, while at the same time, the billionaire class consumes the lion's share of the wealth that we are collectively creating as a nation.
That's another fallacy of the socialists, collectivism. I'll call bovine scatology on that when we come back right after this.
I'm Calling Bovine Scatology with Phil Valentine.
The socialists are big on collectivism. They believe that everybody is equally creating wealth and creating this and creating that. We all know that's not true. There are some folks who are innovators, some folks who are go-getters, some folks who start businesses, some folks who create all sorts of wonderful things. And then there are those who fail, which is about half the businesses in the first 5 years. Do you realize at the 10-year mark, 2/3 of the small businesses have failed? Are you willing to risk everything you've got with a 66% chance that you're going to fail in the first 10 years? Neither am I. We've all heard the story of Steve Jobs, who started with nothing to start Apple. Apple came out with the iPhone in 2007, 10 years after they were bailed out by Bill Gates and Microsoft. Another capitalist entrepreneur who took a chance, who you may not have heard of, is a guy named Andy Rubin. He and his partners started something called Android Incorporated in 2003. In 2005, Google bought Android, and the race for a smartphone was on. And you know the story. Apple beat Android to the market with a smartphone by a good year and a half. It was the iPhone in 2007. Then Samsung came out with the Galaxy phone, and of course they've been going back and forth ever since. Now, what would your life be like if you didn't have a smartphone? Think about that for a second. Smartphones keep getting smarter because of capitalism and because of competition. And just think of the wealth that Apple and Samsung have created for millions and millions of people around the globe, not to mention making people's lives so much better. But the socialists want you to believe that it's not them. Oh, you didn't build that? You remember that from Obama? Yeah, well, they did build that. And if it weren't for them, there wouldn't be all these new jobs. So a worker is not the same as somebody who starts or owns a company. But they want you to think they're all in it together equally, and that the guy or gal who shows up for work and gets an hourly wage should get the same thing and share in the same wealth as somebody who took the chance, had the idea, and went out on a limb to make it work. If our economy worked that way, we wouldn't have all of these conveniences, all of this innovation, because quite frankly, it wouldn't be worth it. Who's going to take a chance if you're going to, at the end of the day, make the same thing as the guy who's working in the mailroom?
And here is something quite incredible that tells you all that you need to know about the results of unfettered capitalism.
Here we go.
All of us want to live long, happy, and productive lives. But in America today, the very rich live, on average, 15 years longer than the poorest Americans.
Bernie wants you to think if you magically had a bunch of money, in other words, if you took the money from the rich folks, gave it to the poor folks would live longer. It's just not true. There are 3 reasons why poor people die at a younger age than rich folks. 3 basic things: smoking, obesity, and exercise. Poor people smoke much more than rich folks. They're fatter than rich folks. And they exercise less than rich folks. There you have it. Has nothing to do with redistributing money and we're going to save a bunch of people's lives. It has everything to do with bad habits. And poor people, I hate to say it, have more bad habits as far as health is concerned than rich folks.
The average wage of the American worker in real dollars is no higher than it was 46 years ago.
This is not even close to being true. Per capita income in 2018 was $36,080. That's in 2018 dollars. Per capita income 46 years ago, $20,288. Again in 2018 dollars. But the socialists have never let the facts get in their way. The sad fact is socialism breeds laziness. These socialist countries don't get anything done, as you can imagine. They're some of the least productive countries on the planet. The Conference Board puts out their annual list where they rank countries by GDP per hour. In other words, what are the most productive countries in the world? There's 62 countries on this list. Guess who ain't on it? China. Yeah, China's not on the list. North Korea, Cuba, all these communist countries. But how about these democratic socialist countries like Bernie Sanders talks about? I mean, that's what he said he is, a democratic socialist. Armenia, they're number 58. Ecuador, number 53, again out of 62. Portugal, 36. Nicaragua, not on the list. Northern Ireland, not on the list. Bolivia, not on the list. Serbia, not on the list. The highest one on the list is Iceland at 15, but they got a population of 360,000 people. Kind of hard to compare apples to apples there. When you find lists of countries ranked by standard of living, which is a subjective thing, you won't find any list with socialist countries on it. Now, the folks like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez love to say that nations like Denmark are socialist countries. The Prime Minister of Denmark spoke at Harvard in 2015. Here's what he said about that.
I know that some people in the US associate the Nordic model with some sort of socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy.
Oh, so sorry. But that doesn't mean that Denmark doesn't have a heaping helping of welfare.
The Nordic model is an expanded welfare state which provides a high level of security for its citizens, but it is also a successful market economy with much freedom to pursue your dreams and live your life as you wish.
That expanded welfare state the Prime Minister spoke of includes their education system in Denmark. But apparently, the education system wasn't good enough for his own son. That's one of the reasons he was coming to Harvard to speak.
The reason why I'm here is also that I'm going to visit my son. Bergo is sitting at the first line here, and who is studying at Harvard this semester. So Bergo, keeping this list in mind, I do have great expectations for your future.
One of the big selling points of socialism is free health care. Now, we can argue over whether health care is a right or not, but do you really have a right to have somebody else pay for it? In the Constitution, we have a right to keep and bear arms. Does that mean the government is obligated to buy us a gun? I don't think so. But let's look at some of the healthcare systems from around the world. Do an internet search for the best healthcare systems in the world, and you'll probably find a top 10 list of socialist healthcare systems. But socialist medicine is great, as long as you don't have to use it. Canada usually ranks at the top or near the top of every survey of the best healthcare systems in the world. But how many people do you see flocking to Canada when they need surgery? Newsweek lists the top 10 hospitals in the world. 4 of the top 10 are in the United States. The top 2 are in the United States. The only country with more than one listed is the United States. Imbibe.com lists the top 10 doctors in the world. 8 of them are practicing in the United States. But people like Elizabeth Warren want to scrap all that and trade it in for socialized medicine.
And in the first 100 days, I want to bring in 135 million people into Medicare for all at no cost to them. Everybody under the age of 18, everybody who has a family of 4, income less than $50,000. I'm going to lower the age of Medicare to 50 and expand Medicare coverage to include vision and dental and long-term care. And then in the third year, when people have had a chance to feel it and taste it and live with it, we're going to vote and we're going to want Medicare for all.
So how much is all this wonderfulness going to cost? Well, some estimates have it as high as $5 trillion a year. Elizabeth Warren's own estimates are closer to $2 trillion a year. To put that in perspective, the federal government brings in about $3.5 trillion a year. So even by her own rosy estimates, we're talking about spending more than half of the money coming into the Treasury on health care. As somebody once said, you think health care is expensive now? Wait till it's free. Let me just cut to the chase. Socialism is for lazy people. It runs on envy. If you want to kill innovation in industry, socialize it. You want to keep new miracle drugs from coming on the market? Socialize the pharmaceutical industry. You want the healthcare industry to work as inefficiently as the VA? Socialize it. There's an old saying in Washington, D.C., if you want less of something, tax it. If you want more of something, subsidize it. You want fewer producers in this country? Tax them out of existence. If you want more deadbeats, subsidize them. We all know how this movie ends. We've seen it. It's called Venezuela.
Nicolas Maduro promised Venezuelans a better life in a socialist paradise.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
And he delivered on the socialism part, which has proved time and time again is a recipe for economic ruin. The paradise part, not so much.
America was born a capitalist nation. It's risen to world prominence as a capitalist country. To say that you love America but want to see it as a socialist country is antithetical. Capitalism and America are joined at the hip. If you're anti-capitalist, you are by definition anti-American. Is capitalism perfect? By no means. We have to be ever vigilant for crony capitalism and dishonest people who want to take advantage of the situation. That's why we have regulation. Think of the regulators as the refs in a football game. They're there to throw the flag and, if need be, throw somebody out of the game. But the last thing you want is for the refs to suit up and play against you. That's what socialism does. It puts everybody on the same team and nobody has any incentive to be good. Why? Because there's no longer any competition. If you think socialists aren't obsessed with money, you got another thing coming. Socialists are as obsessed with money as rich people. The only difference is the money they're obsessed with ain't their own. It says a lot about a person when they're more concerned with people who have more than they do than the people who have less. No matter if you're a socialist or a capitalist, we should be able to agree on at least one goal, and that is the betterment of people's lives. The ultimate goal of any society is standard of living, and the United States has a standard of living unparalleled in the history of mankind, and it's all because of capitalism, not socialism. So is socialism better than capitalism? I'm calling Bovine Scatology on that. We give it 5 out of 5 bulls. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember that you can find show notes and references all at bovinescatology.com. Make sure you follow us on social media. This is Phil Valentine. I'm Calling Bovine Scatology is produced by World Media. All rights reserved.
This has been a presentation of World Media, the future of talk.